The lightning came for me first that night, the way it always did, before the thunder, before the rain, before any warning a man could have used. I stood at the edge of Cairnwatch's high cliff with the whole black weight of the sea below me, and I felt the storm find the marrow of my blood and answer it, and I turned my face up into the wind so that if it took me, it would take only me. Behind me the hold was dark, not sleeping dark, hiding dark. 9 years my people had learned to bar their shutters and bank their fires and keep to the low stone rooms when the sky turned that bruised, breathing green, because when the storm woke the curse in me, the lightning did not always choose the sky. It chose the tallest thing. It chose the nearest warmth. Twice in the early years it had chosen a man standing too close to his alpha, and both times I had knelt in the wet grass afterward with my hands pressed to a chest that would not rise again, and I had learned the only mercy I had left to give my pack: distance. So I stood alone. I always stood alone. The bolt came down the way a blade comes down, white and total, and it struck the cliff not 3 paces from my boots and threw stone into the air, and I did not flinch, because a man cannot flinch from the thing that lives inside him. The thunder that followed was so close it had no sound at all, only a pressure that shoved the breath from my lungs. And somewhere under my ribs, in the hollow place where for the first 30 years of my life a wolf had lived and paced and sung, there was nothing. There had been nothing for 9 years. The storm had taken my wolf the night it took the curse's full grip on me, folded him away into the dark of me and closed the door, and left me a king with a beast's strength and none of a beast's warmth. A man the lightning loved and no one else could. I am Roan, Alpha of Skarholt, Lord of the Storm Reach, and I tell you this so you will understand what I was on the night everything changed. A man who believed, past all argument, that whatever I loved I would kill. The curse was older than me by 9 generations. Every Skarholt child learned it the way other children learn their prayers. Long ago the first of our line swore an oath to the storm itself, to stand between the sea and the people of this coast, to light the cliffs and keep the faith, and never, while a Skarholt drew breath, let a soul be lost to the dark water for want of a hand held out. It was a good oath. It made us. And then a grandson of that first Alpha, a man whose name we do not speak, broke it in the worst way a man can break a vow. He had a fated mate, a fisher's daughter the bond had chosen for him, and when a richer, higher marriage was offered him, he forsook her. He turned his back. He let them put her out of the hold on the night of the great autumn storm, and she walked the cliff path in the lightning with her lantern, the way our keepers had always walked it, and no hand was held out to her, and the sea took her. They say the storm has answered Skarholt blood ever since. They say the curse is not a punishment but a debt, that the storm will not rest against our line until a Skarholt keeps faith where that man broke it. Until an Alpha of our blood is given a fated mate and does not forsake her, does not turn from her, does not let her walk into the dark alone. Only then, the old telling goes, will the lightning lie down and the wolf come home. I had stopped believing the telling long before I stood on that cliff. I had a whole life's proof against it. I had brought healers from the southern courts and seers from the mountain packs, and a woman from the far islands who claimed she could speak to storms, and one by one they had failed, and one of them the lightning had nearly killed, and after that I stopped inviting anyone at all. I had never had a fated mate. 39 years old, and the bond had never once so much as brushed me. I had decided the bond was another thing the curse had taken, like the wolf, like the warmth, like the ordinary right to stand in a room with people who loved me. I had decided I would be the last Alpha of Skarholt, and that when I died the curse would die with me, and that this was the kindest ending I could arrange. I turned to go in. The storm was breaking apart now, the worst of it moving out over the water, the lightning walking away across the sea in slow white strides. And that was when I saw the light. It was down and to the north, on the low cliff path where the keepers' lanterns hung, the path that curved along the very lip of the rock, above the worst of the surf, where in gentler seasons the stormlights were lit each dusk to bring the fishing boats home, and to mark the safe ground for anyone traveling the coast in the dark. No one lit that path in a storm like this. No one could. To walk it while the lightning still hunted was to hang a target on your own back and step off into the rain. My own keepers had not walked it in a storm in 9 years. I had forbidden it after the second death, and the lanterns of that path had gone dark on the wild nights, and more than one traveler had lost the way, and I had added their names to the ones I already carried. But there was a light on it now. A single lantern, warm and small and steady, moving north along the cliff at a walking pace, unhurried, as if the sky above it were not splitting itself apart. As I watched, a bolt came down over the water, near enough that its glare threw the whole cliff into white noon for half a heartbeat, and the little lantern did not so much as gutter. It went on, warm and low, along the edge of the killing drop, and whoever carried it walked as easily as a woman crossing her own kitchen. I went down the cliff stair 3 treads at a time. I told myself it was because someone was about to die on my ground and I could not add another name. That was true, but it was not the whole of it. There was something in the sight of that light, that small, stubborn, unfrightened warmth walking through the very thing that had emptied my life, that reached into me and pulled, low and hard, in a place I had thought the curse had burned hollow years before. I did not have a word for it yet. I would learn the word soon enough. That night all I knew was that I had to reach the light before the lightning did, and that for the first time in 9 years I was running toward a storm instead of standing in it alone, and that my heart, which I had believed the curse had cooled to stone, was going like a hammer in my chest. She heard me on the path, my boots on the wet stone, the loose rock going over the edge, and she stopped and lifted the lantern, and its light fell up onto her face, and I stopped too, a dozen paces off, because whatever I had expected, it was not this. She was not young the way a court thinks of young, and not old, a woman in the full, steady middle of her life, with rain running out of dark hair pinned back off a broad, calm face, and eyes that took me in, a soaking, wild-eyed alpha come pelting down a cliff at her in the middle of the worst storm of the year, with no fear in them at all. Only a kind of patient waiting, as if she had been half expecting company and was glad it had finally come. "You'll want to stand back from the edge," she said over the wind. "The stone's loose there. It's always loose after the 3rd bolt." And she nodded at the ground behind me, where the rock I had knocked free was still bouncing down into the dark, as if I were the reckless one, and she the sensible soul out doing an ordinary night's work. "Do you know where you are?" I said. My voice came out rougher than I meant it. "Do you know what's in this storm?" "Lightning," she said. "It's a bad one. It'll blow through by the low tide, though you can feel it going already." She turned and hung her lantern on the iron hook of the nearest post, the way the keepers of old had done, and its flame steadied and grew, throwing a warm ring of light out over the wet grass and the killing edge, and she stepped back from it and looked at the next post up the path as if she meant to go on and light that one too. "Stop," I said. "You can't be here. The lightning—" I did not know how to say it. In 9 years I had never had to say it to anyone who did not already know. "It comes for the tallest thing, the nearest warmth." "It will come for you." And she looked at me then, and something in her face changed. Not to fear, never once that night to fear, but to a kind of gentle, rueful understanding, as if I had finally said the thing she had been waiting to hear. "It never has," she said. Her name was Nessa, and she had kept the storm lanterns of this coast since she was a girl, as her mother had, and her mother's mother, all the way back further than anyone in her family could count. She told me this the next morning, in the low, warm kitchen of the keeper's cottage at the north end of the cliff, where I had all but carried her out of the storm the night before, over her calm objection that the storm was nearly done, and she still had 4 lanterns to light, and where I had then stood in her doorway, unwilling to come further in, because I did not go into rooms with people in them. She had noticed that, of course. She noticed everything in her quiet way. She had set a cup of something hot on the table nearest the door, within my reach, and stepped well back to the hearth, and left me the choice of it, and gone on talking as if a soaked alpha hovering half in and half out of her doorway at dawn were the most ordinary thing in the world. "You're the king," she said. "Not a question. I'm the king. You're the reason the cliff lanterns go dark on the wild nights." I could not answer that. It was the plainest, truest indictment anyone had laid at my feet in 9 years, and she laid it without a scrap of accusation, only stating a fact she had lived under her whole working life. That on the nights the lights were most needed, the king's law kept them cold, and travelers lost their way for it, and some did not come home. "I forbade it," I said finally, "because keepers were dying." "2 keepers," she said. 9 years ago I knew them." She turned a log on the fire. "And you were right to grieve them, and you were wrong about the rest of it, but you couldn't have known that, so I'll not hold it against you." She looked up at me, and the firelight moved on her face. "The lightning that took them wasn't hunting them, Roan. It was hunting you. They were only standing where you'd been." I had never told her my given name. I had not told her the shape of the curse, or the thing about the tallest thing and the nearest warmth. And she said it back to me as plainly as if she had lived inside the marrow of it. "How do you know that?" I said. And she told me the thing that turned my life on its hinge. She told me that in 31 years of walking the cliffs in every storm that had ever come off that sea, the lightning had never once touched her. That she had stood under bolts that split the posts beside her and glassed the sand below, and left every hair on her arms standing, and it had gone around her the way water goes around a stone. That she had never thought much of it, her mother had been the same, and her grandmother, a long line of women the storm let be, and that she had simply come to believe, without wonder, that this was what a keeper was. Someone the storm would not take, so that the storm could not take the ones the keeper was lighting home. My whole life, she said, I thought it was the lanterns that were blessed, and I was only the hand that carried them. She set the poker down. Last night was the first time I ever wondered if it might be the other way round. I stood in her doorway with my hot cup untouched in my hand, and under my ribs in the hollow place, something that was not my wolf but that had waited 9 years for my wolf to wake it. Some deeper, older thread of me drew taut and hummed once like a plucked string. And out over the sea the last of the storm let go its final bolt, far off, gentle, and I felt it come down, and I felt, for the first time in 9 years, no answer rise in my blood to meet it. The lightning under my skin that always crackled and strained toward every storm lay quiet. It lay down, because she was in the room. I did not tell her that, I did not yet dare. But I did the thing I had not done in 9 years. I stepped over the threshold, and I sat down at her table, and I drank the cup she had left me, and no bolt came for the roof, and no one died, and she smiled at me from the hearth as if I had done something very brave and very ordinary at once, which I suppose I had. I came back the next day. I told myself it was to arrange for the cliff lanterns to be lit again under some safer law. That was true. But I came the day after that, too, and the day after that, and by the end of that first week I had stopped pretending it was about the lanterns. I came because near her the storm in me was quiet. I came because she was the first person in 9 years who did not flinch from me, did not calculate the distance between us, did not treat me like a loaded thing that might go off. And because in her small, warm kitchen, with the sea below and the sky washed clean, I remembered what it was to be a man in a room with another soul, and not a curse wearing a crown. She was not gentle the way the court ladies had been gentle, all deference and downcast eyes. She was gentle the way deep water is gentle, steady, unhurried, holding more than it showed. She had lit the cliffs alone for 20 years since her mother died. She had brought fishing crews home through fog so thick you could not see your own lantern arm. She had a dry, slow way of laughing that started in her eyes a long moment before it reached her mouth. She asked me nothing about the curse and let me tell her everything about it, over that first month, in pieces at my own pace, and she took each piece as it came and did not once tell me I was wrong to carry it, only, now and then, gently, that I did not have to carry it alone. And every time I sat at her table the storm blood in me lay quiet, and every time I climbed back up to the dark hold I felt it wake again, straining toward the sky, and I began, foolish, foolish man that I was, to hope. It was old Brannock who named the hope and named its price. Brannock had read the storms for Scarholt since before I was born, a bent old man with cataract-pale eyes who still, on the wild nights, sat at the high window and watched the lightning and wrote in his cracked book the things it told him. He came to me at the end of that first month, having heard, as everyone in the hold had heard, that the king was walking down to the north cottage every day and coming back with his face changed. He came into my chamber and he looked at me a long while with those milk-pale eyes, and then he said, "You found the storm quiet." "I don't know that word," I said. "There's one born to this coast now and again," he said. "Once in 3 or 4 generations, a woman the storm will not touch so that she can light the ones it would take. We've always thought them a mercy of the sea." He lowered himself into a chair without asking, the way only the very old may. "But the old book says something else, boy. The old book says the storm quiet is not born for the sea. She's born for us, for the broken line. She's the one the curse has been waiting for, the mate the storm cannot take, so that this time when the storm comes for a Scarholt's love, there will be nothing to take. So that this time the Alpha cannot forsake her because the very thing he'd forsake her to escape can't touch her." He tapped the book against his knee. "The curse doesn't break with a kiss, Roan. It never did. It breaks with faith. It breaks when a Scarholt stands his fated mate in the heart of the great storm, on the cliff where he broke it, and does not turn from her, and does not send her away, and does not let go, and the storm passes over them both and leaves them standing." His pale eyes found mine. "That's the test. That's the only test there ever was. and there's a price on it I'll not hide from you because you'd never forgive me if I did. Tell me. The storm can't take a storm quiet, he said, but it can take everything around her. If you stand her in the great storm and she is truly the one, if the bond is true and you keep faith, the lightning finds nothing to strike, and the curse ends and your wolf comes home. But if she is not the one, or if your faith fails, if you flinch, if you reach to pull her back, if for one heartbeat you try to save her from it, then the storm takes what it always takes. He closed the book. The tallest thing, the nearest warmth, and on that cliff in that storm, the nearest warmth to her will be you. I sat a long while in the dark of my chamber after he had gone, and I understood at last and all at once the whole cruel architecture of the thing. The curse had not merely emptied my life. It had built, across 9 generations, the one test I was least able to pass, because to pass it I had to do the single thing every instinct in me screamed against. I had to stand the woman I was coming to love in the heart of the killing storm, on the cliff where a Scarholt's love had died, and I had to not save her. I had to keep faith by keeping still. I, who for 9 years had defined every act of love as an act of distance, who had learned that the only way to keep my people safe was to keep them far, I had to learn in one night in one storm that love was the opposite, that the forsaking was the flinch. That the way to keep her alive was to refuse, with my whole body, to try to. And I was so certain I would fail. I did the thing a coward does when he is also a man in love. I tried to end it before it could ask anything of me. I stopped going to the North Cottage. I told myself it was mercy. I told myself that if I never stood her in the storm could never take her, and that a life of quiet longing at a distance was a small price to pay for her staying alive. I told myself I was protecting her. I was forsaking her. I only did not have the honesty yet to call it by its name. She let 3 days go by. On the 4th she climbed the cliff stair to the hold, which no one did, which the whole of Scarholt watched her do from behind their shutters, the storm lantern keeper walking up into the king's own hall with her chin level and her hands folded. And she found me in the high chamber where I had gone to be alone with my cowardice. And she stood in the door and she said, "You've decided something about me without asking me. I can tell by your face." My father used to make that same face right before he did something foolish for my sake. She came in and shut the door. "So ask me." And so, God help me, I told her, all of it, the test, the price, the tallest thing and the nearest warmth, and how it would be me, standing beside her, that the lightning took if my faith failed or the bond was false. I told her I would not do it. I told her I had lost too many people to the thing in my blood to stand her at the lip of the same drop that had killed a woman 9 generations back, and that I would rather love her from across a room for the rest of my life than take one step onto that cliff. She listened to all of it without moving, and when I was done she was quiet a long time, looking out the high window at the gray sea, and then she said, "You keep telling me what you'll spare me. You haven't once asked me what I want to risk." "Nessa, I have walked into every storm off that sea since I was 7 years old," she said, "and it has never touched me, and I never once knew why, and do you understand what it is, Roan, to spend a whole life being spared and never told the reason? To be the one the storm won't take and never know what you were spared for?" She turned from the window. "You think you're offering me a long, safe life at a distance, but I've had the long, safe distance. I've had 31 years of it. I have lit the cliffs for other people to come home, and I have gone back to that cold cottage alone every single night of my life. And I have watched the king's own lights go dark on the very nights they were needed most, because a man decided from far away that his caring was too dangerous to come close." Her voice did not rise. It never rose. "I would rather stand in the heart of one storm beside you and find out what I was made for than live another 40 years being carefully, kindly, lovingly set aside. That's my risk. It was always going to be mine to take. You don't get to spare me out of it just because sparing is the only way you know how to love." I had no answer. She had reached straight past 9 years of my careful reasoning and put her finger on the rotten timber under all of it. That my mercy and my forsaking had grown, across those years, into the same thing, and I could no longer tell them apart. That every wall I had built to keep my people safe had also been a wall around my own grief, and that she was the first person with the nerve to stand on the far side of it and call it what it was. "There's a storm coming," she said more gently now. "Brannock's known it a week, the biggest off this sea in 9 years, bigger than the night we met. It'll come with the next dark of the moon." She crossed the room to me. She stopped a pace away, closer than anyone had willingly stood to me in 9 years, and the storm blood in me lay down quiet as a sleeping hound. I'm going to be on the cliff that night, Roan, lighting the lanterns, the way my mother did and hers did, whether you're beside me or not. The only question you have to answer is whether you'll keep faith and stand there with me, or whether you'll do what your ancestor did and stay in the warm hold and let the keeper walk the storm alone. She left me with that. She walked back down the cliff stair, past all the shuttered windows, and went home to her cold cottage to wait for the dark of the moon. There was one more thing that stood in my way, and I would be lying if I told this true and left him out. My steward, Havard, had governed Scarholt in all but name for 9 years. Since the curse drove me from the daily rooms of the hold, someone had to hear the petitions and keep the accounts and hold the coast together, and Havard had done it, and done it well, and grown, in the doing, into a man who could not now imagine himself less than he had become. I do not think he was wicked. I have thought about it a long time since, and I think he was only a man who had built his whole life on my curse, the way a house is built on a rock, and who felt the rock beginning to move. He came to me the night before the dark of the moon, and he spoke of caution, and of the good of the pack, and of how a king's sudden death on a cliff in a storm would throw the whole coast into ruin, and how it would be wiser, safer, kinder to everyone, to let this keeper woman go back to her lanterns and keep things as they had steadily, survivably been. And under all of it, quiet and unadmitted even to himself, I heard the thing he could not say, that a whole and uncursed king would not need a steward to rule for him, and that Havard did not know how to be Havard in a Scarholt where the king had come home to himself. I did not rage at him. I understood him too well for that. I only said, "You've kept this coast alive for 9 years, Havard, and I'll not forget it as long as I live. But you've mistaken the thing you were keeping. You thought you were keeping Scarholt. You were keeping my grief, and it's past time for me to carry that myself." I put my hand on his shoulder the first time I had touched another man in 9 years without a corpse at the end of it, and no bolt fell, and he flinched, and I did not. "Go home. Bar your shutters. Tomorrow night, whatever happens on that cliff, it happens because the king chose it, not the steward." He went, and the dark of the moon came down over the storm reach, and out beyond the black water I felt the great storm gathering itself, bigger than anything in 9 years, reaching for the coast, and reaching, through the marrow of my blood, for me. I have tried many times to tell what that night was, and words are poor tools for it. I will do my best, and you must forgive what the words cannot hold. The storm came in off the sea like the end of the world. Not a storm the way the others had been storms. This was the great one, the 9th-year one, the one the whole curse had been climbing toward, and it filled the sky from the water to the mountains with black cloud lit from inside by a lightning that never fully stopped, a constant tearing glow, so that the whole coast stood in a flickering blue-white dusk, though it was the middle of the night. The sea threw itself at the cliffs. The wind came up the rock face screaming. And in my blood the curse rose to meet it, higher and harder than it ever had, the lightning under my skin straining toward the sky so fiercely that I could feel my own hands crackling, could smell the burnt-air smell of it coming off me, and every instinct I had, every scrap of 9 years' hard learning, told me to go up alone to the high cliff and stand there and let it take me and no one else. Instead, I went down the cliff stair in the tearing light, down to the low keeper's path at the very lip of the killing drop, where the lanterns hung dark on their iron hooks, and where Nessa was already walking, unhurried, calm, lighting them one by one, a small warm flame blooming under each cold hook as she passed, laying a line of gentle light along the edge of the abyss while the sky came apart above her. She saw me on the path, and she did not stop, and she did not smile, and she did not say a word, because words were gone in that wind. She only held out her hand. And there it was, the whole test, the whole 9 generations, the whole ruin of my line folded down into one small human choice, to take her hand and stand, or to reach past it and pull her back from the edge. Every part of me that had ever loved anything wanted to pull her back. The lightning was coming down all around us now, on the water, on the high cliff, on the very posts of the path. A bolt struck the hook not 10 feet up the line and burst its lantern into falling sparks, and every fiber of my body was one long scream to seize her and drag her up the stair to shelter, to save her the way I had spent 9 years defining love as saving, which is to say as distance, as removal, as the hand that pulls away. And I understood in that howling instant that the pull was the forsaking, that my ancestor had not forsaken his mate out of cruelty. He had done it in his own crooked heart to save himself, and it came to the same thing in the end. He had let go. And that the only faith the storm would accept was the faith to not let go, to not save her. To stand at the lip of the drop where a Scarholt's love had died, in the full of the killing storm, and take her hand and keep it, and trust the thing the whole world had taught me not to trust. That the way to keep her alive was to refuse, with my whole body and my whole broken soul, to try. I took her hand, and I held it, and when the lightning came down, and it came for us, a bolt so vast and white and total that there was no cliff and no sea and no night, only the light. Every nerve in me shrieked to flinch, to shove her clear, to take it into my own body the way I had taken so much into my own body across 9 years, and I did not. God forgive me, it was the hardest thing I have ever done and the only truly faithful thing I have ever done. I stood, and I held her hand, and I did not try to save her, and I let the storm come. It found nothing to take. The bolt reached us, and there was nothing to strike, not the tallest thing, not the nearest warmth. Because the nearest warmth to the storm quiet was a Scarholt who had, for the first time in 9 generations, kept faith, and the lightning that had come down to kill spread out over the two of us like water poured on a stone, and ran off harmless into the dark, and did not take her, and did not take me. And I felt it. I felt the exact moment the debt was paid, the moment 9 generations of storm let go their grip on my blood. As a great silence, a vast unclenching, the pressure that had lived under my ribs my whole life simply releasing, all at once, into peace. And into that peace, out of the dark place where he had been folded away for 9 years, my wolf came home. I cannot tell you what that was. To have a whole half of yourself sealed away for 9 years, to have forgotten the very sound of your own soul, and then to feel it wake and rise and fill you again. I went down on my knees on the wet stone with the force of it, and Nessa came down with me, her hands on my face, and I wept. A grown king and alpha weeping on a cliff in the rain, because he was back, my wolf was back. The warmth was back, and I could feel her hands on my face, and there was no curse in me to fear. Above us the great storm, the killing storm, the 9th-year storm drew back. It did not blow out, storms do not blow out. But it eased all at once, the tearing constant lightning stilling to distant, gentle flashes far out over the water. The screaming wind dropping to a wet, ordinary gust. The black cloud unclenching into something a man could stand under. And all along the cliff below, and up in the shuttered hold above, the people of Scarholt who had been watching, who had barred their shutters and pressed their faces to the cracks, and watched their mad king go down into the killing storm to stand beside the lantern keeper, saw the impossible thing. Saw the great storm fold itself into calm around the 2 figures on the cliff. Saw the lightning lie down. Saw the king who had not stood among his people in 9 years kneeling on the wet stone with the keeper's hands on his face, whole and weeping, and alive. The storms still come to the storm reach. I want to be honest about that, because when this is told in the hold now, it is sometimes told as though the curse ending meant the weather changed, and it did not. This is a wild coast, and it always will be. What ended was not the storms. What ended was the answer they used to find in my blood, and the long, cold distance I had built my whole life on, mistaking it for love. We were married before the next moon. I will not pretend the whole of Scarholt understood at first. Some of them had spent 9 years learning to fear me, and fear is a slow thing to unlearn, but they came in the end in their own time, and the coming was its own quiet mending. Havard I did not humble. I have seen kings break the men who governed in their absence, and I have never seen it make a king larger. I gave him a good hold to the south, a real one with real work in it, where a man who knew how to hold a coast together could be his whole self and not merely the shadow of another man's grief, and he took it. And I think in time he was even glad. A man does not always know, until he is set free of it, how heavy the thing was that he was carrying. He sent a gift when our first winter came. I keep it still. But I did not marry Nessa the way an alpha claims a Luna in the old tellings, with a cloak thrown over her shoulders before a bowing hall to shame the ones who scorned her, because no one had ever scorned her, and because I had learned on that cliff the difference between a claiming and a keeping. What I did was this. On the morning after the storm, when the wolf was quiet and whole in me and the sea lay gray and easy below, I went down to the north cottage and I knelt in her doorway, the same doorway I had once been afraid to cross, and I did not throw a cloak over her or command her or name her mine before any crowd. I asked her. I told her what I was now, whole and uncursed and free, a king with a whole life to give, and I told her she had already saved that life once by refusing to let me spare her out of it. And I asked her, plainly, on my knees, giving her the whole free choice of it, whether she would keep faith with me the way I had finally learned to keep faith with her. And she asked me the hard question. She always asked the hard ones. If I'd said no on that cliff, she said. If I'd wanted the long, safe distance after all, would you have let me have it? And I gave her the true answer because she deserved a true one and not a pretty one. I don't know, I said. The man I was 3 months ago would have taken it from you and called it mercy. But I hope, the man I am now would have let you go if going was what you wanted and kept faith with that too. Keeping faith isn't holding on to what you want, Nessa. I learned that too late and I nearly learned it fatally. It's not letting go of the person because you're afraid and not holding on to them for the same reason. It's asking, and then it's honoring the answer. I looked up at her. So I'm asking. And whatever you answer, I'll honor it, and no storm will change that, because there's no storm left in me to change it. She was quiet a moment, and then the slow laugh started in her eyes, a long moment before it reached her mouth, and she said, yes, freely and knowing everything, and not because you kneel well, though you do. Yes, Roan. And she took my hands and drew me up out of the doorway and into the warm, small kitchen, and this time I did not hover at the threshold because there was no reason left to. She kept the lanterns. I want you to know that because it is the truest thing about her and the thing I love best. She did not put down the keeper's work to become a Luna in a high hall. She is the Luna of Scarholt, and the coast honors her. But on the wild nights she is still on the cliff with her lantern, lighting the ones who are trying to come home through the dark. Only now the king's lights are lit again on every path on every stormy night by my law, the first law I made when the curse was gone. And now, on those nights when she walks the cliffs, she does not walk them alone. That is where you will find us still, on the wild nights, when the storms come in off that black sea the way they always have and always will. Two figures on the cliff path, moving unhurried from post to post, a line of small warm flames blooming behind them along the edge of the drop. The keeper and her king, and the wolf running easy at our heels, lighting the way for anyone lost in the dark, so that no soul on this coast is ever again left to walk the storm without a hand held out. The storms still come. But now, when the sky opens over the storm reach and the lightning falls, it falls into the water, far and soft and harmless. And I stand on the cliff in the rain with her hand in mine, a whole man and a whole life, and I do not flinch, and I do not let go.